Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. The writer Voltaire once wrote, Pour l'encouragement de l'autre, he meaning literally to encourage the others. He was talking about Vice Admiral Lord Byng, a man who failed in a job. He had a task to do and he failed, and so the Admiralty issued a death warrant for Byng for failure. They were rough times. When he received it, he had to write out his own death warrant and sign it himself, and then get hanged from the yardarm. Tough times indeed. But you'd think people would learn from that and not sign your own death warrant. Unfortunately, for Humza Yousaf, that's exactly what he's done. The man's an idiot. He's gambling his leadership, absolutely and without fail, on the basis that he says he's going to win the general election. That'd be a neat trick, considering he'd need to get over 300 seats. There's only going to be 57 in Scotland. One can only presume he means he's going to win the most seats in Scotland. That isn't going to happen either. There certainly won't be a majority, which is the only way in which he could win. At best, he may get 20 seats, and it's a very strange thing that he wants to do. To put his leadership on the line like that by repeatedly declaring that the SNP will win, and that is, of course, despite the fact that the polls show that they are not only slipping but getting worse, that their core reason for being, independence, is falling in support, and at the same time their general level of support is falling. Numbers are shrinking, money just isn't there. They're reliant almost entirely on zombie funds from people leaving money in the wills. There's very few corporate sponsors, and the bills keep mounting up. And this, of course, is why they're so desperate to get that camper van back. They've probably got wages to meet this month. It's all very, very serious for them. Of course, he went yesterday to Perth. He bored the arse off all those people who were really glad when he finished his speech. Half an hour he was there, yabbering on the same old shit. Nothing new, nothing spectacular. How do you fill half an hour like that? And yet, what has he got to show for it? Nothing. He mocked the Scottish Labour leader, sure, predicting that he'd bend the knee to Keir Starmer rather than stand up, he says. But he went on, he said, we must and we will win this general election. Now, a few years ago, they won 48 out of the 59 seats. That was what, 2019. So, they did win that election by any metric. When you're winning 48 out of 59, it's a win. Since then, however, things have altered. They're nowhere near it. Absolutely nowhere near. They're going to fall behind Labour, according to the latest polls. And even if the polls are only slightly out, it will still be a massive, probably halving of their numbers. No leader can survive that. The speculation that Westminster leader Stephen Flynn could replace him if there's a bad result, although that's only a speculation because you cannot have, according to the SNP's own rules, a leader at Westminster. The leader must come from Scotland, must come from the Holyrood Parliament. So it would mean Flynn having to give up his seat, assuming, of course, he wins his seat at the next general election, then going up, then trying to fight and win a seat in Scotland. I think it's most likely Kate Forbes takes over, the only sane one within the party. Well, she's not the only sane one. I suppose there's Fergus, but I can't see Fergus as leader. I see him as a good lieutenant. Someone that if Kate became leader, he would be standing there beside her, shoulder to shoulder, and giving the support. So I think that's Fergus's role. But that's it. That's all they have if they want to continue. Either way, Humza has gone. Now, he's talking about having an alternative to what he calls Brexit Britain, but that's the Britain the people of Britain voted for. Remember, Scotland, part of the United Kingdom, as they voted to remain in, and they must abide by the democratic vote, despite what Humza Yousaf thinks. And his claim was that they have to win the election, because when the SNP wins the election, Scotland wins. Well, I've got to say, if the SNP wins, the people of Scotland lose big time. And he's saying that a win, he said for a win, he says you must take 29 of the 57 constituencies. So not nearly winning the largest block of votes, but an absolute, majority, the 59 out of the 29 out of the 57. The man's living in a deluded cloud cuckoo land. You can tell he's insisting that the fight is between the SNP and the Tories. He's got his bee in his bonnet about Tory values, Tory voters, Tory MPs. The Tories aren't the challenger in Scotland. The man is so deluded and so filled with hatred that he cannot see where his true challenge lies. What is on? What is he? Is he using the substances that his brother-in-law sells? Perhaps it seems to be the only excuse. And he says he wants to resolve here and now to win each and every one of those seats. He wants to get and evict all the Tories. Well, it isn't going to happen. Indeed, the Tories are likely to take 1 or 2 seats off the SNP. And then, of course, you've got Lisa Cameron, who actually jumped from the SNP to the Tories. Mainly because of all the abuse she was getting, of course, from the SNP. Because they are a party filled with hateful, self-loathing people. And yet, he said it's not just Tory politicians he wants to get rid of, but Tory policies, Tory ideas, Tory values, whether delivered by anyone. So it's actually, he's calling, like I mentioned in the previous video, he's calling for the eradication of Tories. This is so insidious. This is secret police type stuff, isn't it? Thought crime. And he's just loathing. He's a bubbling bag of hate. He says the SNP is the only party arguing for investment in public services. They've cut the investment to cut every year. They've cut investment. They keep saying, we're putting more money in. You may be putting a bit more money in, but if it isn't by this, rising by inflation, then it's a real terms cut. And that's all you've got. The only department that actually increased spending and funding this year was independence, foreign embassies and making sure Angus can fly. Every other department got a real terms cut, despite the lies that you're telling. So there's no investment, and one only has to look at the roads. If it isn't for the potholes that make the whole of the place look like the surface of the moon, it's the fact you can't even duel an A9. As for the A96, don't bother. But it is, thankfully, a party on the way out, a party of yesterday's men, led by a failure, led by someone who knows he's done and that he will never, ever lead Scotland again. One way or another, Humza Yousaf has signed his own death warrant by saying the SNP will win. That certainly isn't going to happen. He's a very sad man. Thanks for listening.